The rain came down like judgment that October night, and when Willa Voss knocked on the widower's door, she expected nothing more than permission to sleep in his barn until dawn. She stood on the porch of the farmhouse with water streaming from her wool cloak, one hand pressed to the swell of her belly beneath the soaked fabric, the other raised to knock again. The child inside her kicked, as if protesting the cold. 6 months along and cast out 3 weeks past, she had walked the frontier roads begging shelter from families who slammed doors in her face or set dogs on her before she could finish speaking. Green skin and tusks marked her as orc. The belly marked her as something worse in their eyes. The door opened. A man stood framed in lamplight, stocky and broad across the shoulders, not tall but solid as a oak stump. Dark hair hung damp across his forehead as if he had just washed. He wore a work shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and held a dish towel in one hand. His eyes went wide when he saw her, but he did not reach for a weapon or shout. "Please," Willa said. Her voice came out hoarse from days of little speaking. "I am asking only for shelter in your barn. One night. I can pay with work in the morning before I go." The man looked past her at the storm, then back to her face. His gaze dropped to her belly and something shifted in his expression. Not disgust, something else. "You are soaked through," he said. His voice carried the slow warmth of someone who chose his words with care. "And pregnant. I am not putting you in a barn." Willa stiffened. She had heard kind voices before that turned cruel once she relaxed. "I am not asking for charity, just the barn. I heard you the first time." He stepped back and pulled the door wider. "I am also not arguing with a woman in a downpour. Get inside." She hesitated on the threshold. The house beyond him looked simple and clean. A fire burned in the hearth. The smell of bread and stew drifted from the kitchen. Everything in her body wanted to step into that warmth, but her mind held her frozen. "I will not hurt you," the man said quietly. "My name is Garrett Yates. This is my farm. You can leave at first light if you want, but tonight you need to be warm and dry." Willa stepped inside. Water pooled on the floorboards beneath her. She felt suddenly aware of how she must look, how she must smell after weeks on the road. Garrett closed the door behind her, and the sound of the storm became muffled and distant. "Let me get you a towel," he said, and disappeared down a hallway. Willa stood dripping in the entry, taking in the house. Modest furniture, well cared for. A spinning wheel in the corner that looked unused. 2 chairs by the fire instead of one, though dust covered the seat of the second. On the mantel sat a small portrait of a woman with kind eyes and brown hair pinned up in a simple style. Garrett returned with an armload of towels and a blanket. "The washroom is through there if you want to get out of those wet things. I can heat water for a bath. You do not need to trouble yourself. It is no trouble." He set the towels on a chair. "I have stew on the stove and bread from this morning. You will eat after you get warm." Willa opened her mouth to protest, but he had already turned toward the kitchen. She stood there a moment longer, waiting for the trap to spring shut, for him to name his price or reveal what he truly wanted. Nothing came. The washroom was small but spotless. She peeled off her wet clothes with shaking hands and scrubbed herself down with the towels, then wrapped herself in the blanket he had provided. It smelled of lavender and wood smoke. When she emerged, Garrett had set a bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread on the table near the fire. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair. "Eat while it is hot." She sat slowly, still waiting. The stew was rich with vegetables and bits of salt pork. The bread was dense and good. She ate 3 bites, then 4, then could not stop herself from wolfing down the entire bowl. Garrett refilled it without comment. She ate that too. When she finally set down the spoon, he was sitting in the other chair by the fire, mending a shirt. His hands moved with practiced ease, the needle flashing in the firelight. "Thank you," Willa said. "You are welcome. I will work in the morning to repay you. I can mend fences or tend animals or whatever you need." Garrett looked up from his mending. His eyes were gray and direct. "Where are you headed?" "North. I heard there are settlements past the ridge that are more tolerant of mixed folk." "That is a long walk for someone in your condition." "I do not have much choice." He was quiet for a moment, studying her. "The father, not in the picture." Willa kept her voice flat. She would not explain about Crag, the warrior her tribe had chosen for her, or how she had refused him and fled rather than accept a match she did not want. She would not talk about the human traitor she had met in the spring, the one who had sweet words and sweeter lies, who vanished the moment she told him about the child. None of that was this stranger's business. Garrett nodded as if her answer was enough. "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow too, if the weather does not clear." "I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing." He returned to his mending. "I have the space and you need the help. It is that simple." Nothing was ever that simple. Willa had learned that much. But she was too tired to argue and too grateful for the warmth to walk back out into the storm. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and watched the fire burn. The rain continued through the night and into the next day. Garrett set her up in the small room off the kitchen, the one that had clearly belonged to his wife. The bed was soft, and the quilts were thick, and Willa slept for 12 hours straight, waking only when sunlight streamed through the window. She found Garrett in the barn, forking hay to a pair of sturdy plow horses. He looked up when she entered and smiled, an easy expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You are up," he said. "There is porridge on the stove if you are hungry." "I said I would work." "You also said you were leaving this morning." He pitched another forkful of hay. "The road north is going to be mud for the next 2 days at least. You might as well wait it out here." Willa crossed her arms. "I do not take charity." "Then help me with the chickens. They need to be fed and the eggs collected." He gestured toward the coop with his chin. "After that you can rest. Pregnant women should not be hauling fence posts." She wanted to argue, but the chickens did need tending and she could do that much. The work felt good after days of walking. The hens clucked and fussed as she scattered grain and gathered eggs into a basket. When she returned to the house, Garrett had breakfast laid out and coffee brewing. They ate in comfortable silence. Garrett read from a week-old newspaper while Willa tried not to stare at him. He was not handsome in any conventional way. His face was too broad, his nose slightly crooked as if it had been broken and healed poorly. But there was something solid and trustworthy about him, something that made her want to believe he meant what he said. "You said your name was Garrett Yates," she said finally. "That is right. I am Willa Voss. Good to properly meet you, Willa." He set down his paper. "How far along are you?" 6 months, near enough. "And you have been walking for 3 weeks. I am stronger than I look." "I do not doubt it." He poured more coffee into his cup. "But you should not have to be walking at all, not in your state." "What else am I supposed to do? Stay with a tribe that called me shamed? Go to human towns that want nothing to do with orcs?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "You could stay here." Willa stared at him. "What, stay here? Through the winter at least. You can help around the farm and I will make sure you and the baby are looked after. You do not even know me. I know you are alone and pregnant and trying to survive. That is enough." He met her gaze steadily. "I am not asking for anything in return if that is what worries you. Just your help with chores when you are able. The rest of the time you rest and stay healthy." It was too generous, too easy. Willa had been burned too many times to accept things at face value. "Why would you do this?" Garrett looked toward the mantel where the portrait of his wife sat. "Because someone should. And I have the room and the means and no good reason to say no. People will talk. A human man and an orc woman under the same roof. People talk no matter what you do. Let them. Willa wanted to say yes. Every part of her ached to accept this offer, to stop running, to have a place to sleep and food to eat and time to prepare for the birth. But accepting meant trusting, and trust had cost her everything already. I will think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. Garrett stood and gathered the dishes. The offer stands as long as you need it. She stayed 2 more days, then a week, then 2 weeks. The autumn deepened around the farm. Garrett worked the fields and tended the animals while Willa helped where she could, mending clothes and cooking meals and keeping the house clean. They fell into an easy rhythm that felt almost natural. He was good company when he talked and comfortable in his silences when he did not. He made terrible jokes while doing chores and sometimes sang old work songs off-key that made Willa smile despite herself. One evening as they sat by the fire after supper, Willa finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. Your wife, what happened to her? Garrett was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. Fever took her 2 winters ago. She was sick for a week and then she was gone. I am sorry. So am I. He rubbed a hand over his face. We had been married 8 years. I thought we would have more time. Were you happy together? Mostly, yes. She was a good woman, practical, kind. We built this farm together from nothing. He glanced at her. Why do you ask? I am trying to understand why you are helping me. If you loved her, why would you want another woman in her house? You are not replacing her, Garrett said gently. And this is just help, Willa. Nothing more complicated than that. But it was becoming more complicated. Willa could feel it in the way her heart jumped when Garrett smiled at her, in the way she found herself watching him work from the kitchen window, in the way his presence made her feel safe for the first time in months. She was falling for him, and it terrified her because she did not know if he felt anything in return, or if she was just another project for a lonely man. November came with frost on the ground and bare trees. Willa's belly grew rounder and the baby kicked more often. Garrett built a cradle in the barn and brought it inside, setting it near the stove where it would stay warm. He asked her questions about what she would need for the birth and made lists of supplies to buy in town. You do not have to do all this, Willa said, watching him sand the cradle smooth. I want to. But why? Garrett set down his sandpaper and looked at her, really looked at her, not just a glance but a long, steady examination that made her feel stripped bare. Because I care about you, both of you. Is that so hard to believe? Yes, Willa said honestly. Everyone else has made it clear that I do not matter, that this baby does not matter. Why would you be different? Because I am. He stood and crossed to where she sat. Up close she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes. He was older than her by perhaps 15 years, but it did not bother her. If anything, it made her feel safer, like he had lived enough to know what he wanted and what he did not. I have been alone in this house for 2 years, Willa. I have been going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Then you showed up on my doorstep, and suddenly I have a reason to get up in the morning that is not just habit. Her breath caught. Garrett. I am not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know that you matter. To me, you matter. Willa stood, the bulk of her belly between them. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers brushing the stubble on his jaw. He closed his eyes at the contact and she felt him tremble slightly. I am falling in love with you, she whispered. I did not want to, I tried not to, but I am. Garrett opened his eyes. They were bright with emotion. Good, because I have already fallen. He kissed her then, gentle and careful as if she might break. She kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks, tasting coffee and hope on his lips. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. What do we do now? Willa asked. Garrett took her hands in his. They were rough and warm, working man's hands that had built this farm and this life. I have been thinking about that. I have a proposal for you, but I need you to hear me out before you answer. All right. The baby is going to be born in a few months. When that happens, people are going to ask questions. Whose child it is, whether it is legitimate, what rights it has. An orc child with no father's name is going to have a hard time of it out here on the frontier. There are laws, bad laws, about children born out of wedlock to orc mothers. They can be taken and put in workhouses or worse. Willa felt cold dread pool in her stomach. She had heard the stories too. What are you saying? I am saying I want to give the child my name, legally, so that no one can question its right to exist or to inherit or to have a future. You want to adopt the baby? No. Garrett squeezed her hands. I want to marry you. Willa stared at him. What? Marry me? Before the birth? Make it legal and binding so the child is born legitimate and has my name and my protection, so you both have my protection forever. Garrett, that is. She could not find words. That is too much. You cannot just marry me to fix this problem. I am not marrying you to fix a problem. His voice was steady and sure. I am asking you to marry me because I love you and I want to build a life with you and I want to be a father to this child, whether it shares my blood or not. The legal protection is important, yes, but that is not the only reason. It is not even the main reason. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and strong and stubborn as hell. I know you work hard and you do not complain and you make me laugh. I know that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to do is see your face. Is that enough to start a marriage on? Maybe not for everyone, but it is enough for me. People will say you are crazy. A human marrying an orc, raising another man's child. Let them say it. Garrett released one of her hands to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had spilled over. I am done living my life according to what other people think I should do. My wife died and I learned that time is too precious to waste on fear and doubt. I love you, Willa. Say yes. She wanted to. Every part of her wanted to say yes. But the fear held her back, the certainty that this was too good to be true and it would all fall apart the moment she let herself believe in it. Can I think about it? She asked. Garrett smiled, soft and understanding. Take all the time you need. The offer is not going anywhere. She thought about it for 3 days, turning the question over in her mind from every angle. What if he changed his mind after the baby came? What if his family objected and made trouble? What if she was just a replacement for the wife he had lost, and not someone he truly loved? The doubts circled and circled until she felt dizzy with them. On the 3rd night she woke to the baby kicking hard enough to make her gasp. She put her hand on her belly and felt the tiny life moving inside her. This child who had done nothing wrong but existed. This child who deserved safety and love and a future. This child who would have none of those things if she let pride or fear make her decisions. She got out of bed and padded down the hall to Garrett's room. The door was ajar and she could see him sleeping on his back, one arm flung over his head. She knocked softly. He woke instantly, sitting up with the alertness of someone used to emergencies. Willa, what is wrong? Is it the baby? The baby is fine. She stepped into the room. I have an answer for you. Garrett swung his legs out of bed. He wore a simple nightshirt and his hair stuck up in several directions. Even rumpled and half awake, he looked solid and real and absolutely certain. Tell me. Yes, Willa said. I will marry you. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He stood and crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her as carefully as if she were made of glass. You mean it? I mean it. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the smell of him. I am terrified and I do not understand why you want this, but yes, I will marry you. I want this because I love you, Garrett said into her hair. That is the only reason that matters. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, and Willa felt something inside her chest unclench for the first time since she had left her tribe. She was going to have a family again. She was going to have a home. The next morning, Garrett rode into town to speak with the minister and file the necessary papers. He returned near sunset with a grim expression that made Willa's stomach drop. "What happened?" she asked as he came through the door. "We have a problem." He hung up his coat and hat. "My late wife's brother, Marcus, heard about the marriage plans. He is contesting it. On what grounds? He claims I am not of sound mind, that I have been bewitched or coerced, and that the marriage is a scheme to steal the farm's inheritance from the family." Garrett's jaw was tight with anger. It is nonsense, but he has money and connections. He filed a formal objection with the territorial court. Willa sank into a chair. "So we cannot marry." "We can, but not until the court hears the case and dismisses his claim. That could take months." Garrett knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "I am going to fight this, Willa. Marcus does not have any legal right to this farm, and he knows it, but he is trying to make trouble because he has always thought he should have inherited instead of Catherine." "Who is Catherine?" "My late wife. She inherited the farm from her father and brought it to our marriage. When she died, it passed to me. Marcus was furious about that. He has been looking for a way to contest the will ever since. If he makes enough trouble, could he win? No, the law is clear. But he can delay things and make our lives difficult in the meantime." Garrett's expression was fierce. "I will not let him stop this marriage, Willa. I promise you that." 2 days later, a rider came to the farm with a summons. Garrett was to appear before the territorial magistrate in 3 weeks to answer Marcus's claims. Willa watched from the window as Garrett spoke with the rider, his shoulders tense. After the man left, Garrett came inside and pulled her into his arms. "It is going to be all right." "You do not know that. I do. Marcus is grasping at straws. He has no case." But Willa could not shake the feeling that this was the trap she had been waiting for, the moment when everything fell apart. A week later, the second blow fell. Willa was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard horses approaching. She turned to see 3 riders coming up the road, and her blood went cold. She recognized them instantly, orcs from her tribe. The one in front was Thurg, the chieftain's eldest son and Cragg's closest friend. Garrett came out of the barn, alerted by the sound of hoofbeats. He moved to stand beside Willa as the riders stopped in front of the house. Thurg dismounted. He was tall and heavily muscled, with ritual scars across his arms and a battle axe strapped to his back. His eyes swept over Willa with contempt before settling on Garrett. "You are the human-harboring Willa Voss," Thurg said. It was not a question. "I am Garrett Yates. This is my farm. What do you want?" "I want the woman. She belongs to our tribe and she will return with us." Willa found her voice. "I do not belong to anyone, Thurg. I left of my own free will." "You left in disgrace after refusing the match that was chosen for you. The chieftain has decided to be merciful. He will accept you back if you return now and agree to the marriage with Cragg." "I am not going back." Thurg's expression darkened. "You carry a child with no father. That brings shame on all of us. Come back, marry Cragg, and the child will have a name and you will have your place restored." "She already has a name," Garrett said quietly, "and she has a place here." Thurg turned his attention back to Garrett. "This is tribal business, human. It does not concern you. It concerns me when you come to my land making demands." Garrett's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. "Willa is staying here. She is under my protection." "Your protection means nothing. She is orc. You are human. The frontier courts will not uphold any claim you make on her. I am not claiming her. She is choosing to stay." Thurg ignored him and spoke directly to Willa. "Last chance. Come back now or you will be declared dead to the tribe. No orc will speak to you or trade with you or help you. You will be cut off forever." Willa lifted her chin. "I made my choice when I left. I am not coming back." "Then you are a fool." Thurg remounted his horse. "When the human tires of you and throws you out, do not come crawling back to us." He wheeled his horse around and the three riders left at a gallop, kicking up dust from the road. Willa watched them go and felt the last thread connecting her to her old life snap. Garrett put his arm around her shoulders. "You are shaking." "I knew they might come. I did not think they actually would. You do not have to worry about them anymore. You are safe here." But the visits from Marcus and the tribal envoy had shaken Willa badly. She felt trapped between two forces, both trying to control her life and her choices. That night she barely slept, tossing and turning with anxiety. The next morning Garrett had to go into town for supplies. Willa stayed behind, too tired and too worried to make the trip. She was in the kitchen kneading bread when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a well-dressed man in his 40s standing on the porch. He had the same brown hair as the woman in the portrait on the mantel, though his face was harder and his eyes colder. "You must be the orc," the man said. Willa kept her hand on the door. "You must be Marcus." "I am Marcus Hartwell, yes, Catherine's brother." He looked her up and down with obvious distaste. "May I come in?" "No, I just want to talk." "Then talk from where you are standing." Marcus sighed as if she were being unreasonable. "Very well, I came to make you an offer. I will withdraw my legal objection to your marriage if you sign over any claim to this farm to me." "I do not have any claim to the farm." "Not yet. But once you marry Garrett, you will. And when he dies, everything will pass to you and whatever half-breed child you are carrying." "I cannot allow that." Willa felt fury rise in her chest. "Get off this property." "I am trying to be reasonable here. Sign a legal document relinquishing any inheritance rights and I will let the marriage proceed. Refuse, and I will tie this up in court for years. Your child will be born a bastard and you will have no legal protections at all. Garrett will not agree to that. Garrett does not need to know. This can be between you and me." Marcus pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Just sign this and all your problems go away. Except the problem where I give up my future and my child's future to make you happy." "No thank you." Marcus's expression hardened. "You are making a mistake. I have powerful friends in the territorial government. I can make your life very difficult." "You can try." Willa stepped back and slammed the door in his face. She stood there with her heart pounding, listening to his footsteps retreat across the porch and the sound of his horse riding away. Then she sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. When Garrett returned an hour later, she told him everything. He listened with growing anger, his hands clenching and unclenching. "That bastard came here while I was gone." Garrett's voice was rough with fury. "He had no right. He thinks he can intimidate me into giving up my claim." "You do not have to give up anything. That farm is mine, and when I die it will be yours and our child's. Marcus can choke on his objections for all I care." "But what if he is right? What if he can tie this up in court until after the baby is born?" Garrett pulled her into his arms. "Then we will fight him in court. But I am not letting him bully you, and I am not letting anyone tell us we cannot be married. Do you understand me?" Willa nodded against his chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to have his certainty and his strength. But the fear kept whispering that it was all going to fall apart. The court date arrived on a cold morning in late November. Garrett dressed in his best clothes, and Willa wore a simple dress that she had let out to accommodate her belly. They rode into town together in the wagon, not speaking much, both lost in thought. The territorial magistrate held court in a building that also served as the general store. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the spectacle of a human man fighting for the right to marry an orc woman. Willa felt their eyes on her as she climbed down from the wagon, felt their judgment and their curiosity. Inside, Marcus sat with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man in expensive clothes. Garrett and Willa took their seats across the aisle. The magistrate, a gray-haired woman with a no-nonsense expression, called the court to order. Marcus's lawyer stood first. He argued that Garrett was not in his right mind, that he was being taken advantage of by a scheming orc woman who wanted to steal his property. He presented testimonies from people in town who claimed Garrett had seemed distracted and strange since Willa arrived. He suggested that orc women had unnatural powers of persuasion, and that Garrett had fallen under some kind of spell. Willa felt sick listening to it. The accusations were absurd, but they were also insidious, playing on every prejudice and fear that humans held about orcs. When the lawyer finished, Garrett stood to speak in his own defense. He had refused to hire a lawyer, insisting he could speak for himself. "Your Honor," Garrett said, his voice clear and steady, "everything you just heard is nonsense. I am marrying Willa Voss because I love her and because I choose to. No one is coercing me or manipulating me. I am a grown man who knows his own mind." "Can you explain why you would choose to marry an orc woman who is pregnant with another man's child?" the magistrate asked. "Because the circumstances of how she came to be pregnant do not change who she is or what she means to me. I love her. I want to build a life with her. I want to be a father to her child. Those are my choices, and I am making them freely." Marcus stood up. "Your Honor, my brother-in-law has been alone for 2 years since my sister died. He is lonely and vulnerable. This orc woman saw an opportunity and she took it." Garrett turned to face Marcus. "You did not care about my loneliness when you were trying to contest Catherine's will. You did not care about my well-being when you demanded I sell the farm and split the proceeds with you. You care about money and property, Marcus. That is all you have ever cared about." "That is not true." "Then why are you here? If you actually cared about my happiness, you would let me marry the woman I love without making a spectacle of it." The magistrate held up a hand. "That is enough. Mr. Hartwell, do you have any actual evidence that Mr. Yates is mentally unfit or being coerced?" Marcus's lawyer shuffled his papers. "We have the testimonies from townspeople, Your Honor. Testimonies that he seems distracted. That is not evidence of anything except maybe that he is in love." The magistrate looked at Garrett. "Mr. Yates, do you swear that you are entering into this marriage of your own free will with full knowledge of what it entails?" "I do, Your Honor." "And Miss Voss, do you swear the same?" Willa stood. "I do." The magistrate nodded. "Then I see no reason to prevent this marriage." "Mr. Hartwell, your objection is overruled. This court finds no evidence of coercion or mental unfitness. Mr. Yates and Miss Voss are free to marry." She banged her gavel. "Case dismissed." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Marcus turned red with anger and stormed out with his lawyer on his heels. Garrett pulled Willa into a tight embrace. "It is over," he whispered into her hair. "We won." Willa felt tears streaming down her face. "I cannot believe it, believe it." Garrett pulled back and cupped her face in his hands. "Nothing is stopping us now." They were married 3 days later in the same building where the court had been held. The minister performed a short, simple ceremony with 2 witnesses pulled from the general store. Garrett wore his good suit, and Willa wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric he had bought in town. It was not white, just a soft blue wool that matched her eyes, but it was clean and new and hers. When the minister asked if Garrett took Willa to be his wife, he said, "I do," with such conviction that Willa felt it in her bones. When she said the same, her voice shook, but she meant every word. The minister pronounced them married, and Garrett kissed her there in front of the witnesses and anyone else who happened to be watching. It was not a long kiss or a passionate one, just a gentle press of his lips to hers, but it felt like a promise. They rode back to the farm as husband and wife. Willa kept looking at the ring on her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to Garrett's mother. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. That night they lay in bed together in what was now their room. Garrett held her carefully, one hand resting on her belly where the baby kicked. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I think so. It still does not feel real." "It is real. You are Willa Yates now. That is as real as it gets." Willa turned to face him. "Thank you for fighting for me, for fighting for us." "You do not need to thank me. I would do it again 100 times over." He kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do before the baby comes." The baby came on a snowy night in late January. Willa had been having pains all day, but she had not said anything, thinking they were just the false labor the midwife had warned her about. By evening, though, the pains were too strong to ignore, and Garrett sent for the midwife while he boiled water and prepared the room. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Garrett stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. When the pain got too bad, she squeezed his hand hard enough to bruise, but he never complained. The baby was born just after dawn, a healthy boy with green-tinted skin and tiny tusks already visible on his lower jaw. The midwife cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket and handed him to Willa. She looked down at her son and felt her heart crack open. He was perfect, tiny and perfect in hers. "He is beautiful," Garrett said, peering over her shoulder. His voice was thick with emotion. "You want to hold him?" Garrett took the baby with shaking hands, cradling him against his chest. The baby opened his eyes and looked up at Garrett with a serious expression, and Garrett laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Hello there," Garrett said softly. "I am your father, and I am going to take care of you for the rest of my life." Willa watched them together and felt tears spill down her cheeks. This was her family. This was real. "What should we name him?" Garrett asked. Willa had thought about this for weeks. She wanted a name that honored where the child came from but also where he was going. A name that would fit in both worlds. "Bram," she said. "His name is Bram Yates," Garrett smiled. "Bram, I like that." The first few weeks after the birth were exhausting. Bram woke every 2 hours to feed, and Willa was sore and tired and learning how to be a mother. But Garrett was there for all of it, changing diapers and walking the floor with a fussy baby and cooking meals so Willa could rest. He sang to Bram in his off-key voice and told him stories and looked at him like he hung the moon. One evening when Bram was 3 weeks old, Garrett brought up the christening. "I was thinking we should have him baptized at the church," he said. "Make it official." Willa hesitated. "Will they even allow it? An orc baby, he is my son. They will allow it or they will answer to me. The people in town already look at us like we are strange. Bringing Bram to church will just make it worse. Let them look." Garrett was firm on this. "Bram deserves to be welcomed into the community same as any other child. I am not going to hide him away like he is something shameful." Willa knew he was right, but the thought of walking into that church with her half-orc son and facing all those staring eyes made her stomach churn. Still, she agreed because Garrett wanted it and because Bram did deserve to be acknowledged. The christening was set for the first Sunday in March. Willa spent days sewing a proper gown for Bram, tiny and white with careful stitches. Garrett cleaned his good suit and polished his boots. The morning of the christening, Willa dressed Bram in his gown and wrapped him in a blanket. He looked so small and fragile that she almost backed out. But Garrett took her hand and they walked into town together. The church was full. More people than usual had turned out, drawn by curiosity or judgment or both. Willa felt their eyes on her as she walked down the aisle with Bram in her arms. She kept her head high and her eyes forward. The minister was an older man who had been kind enough during their wedding. He took Bram from Willa and held him up in front of the congregation. "We are gathered here to baptize this child, Bram Yates, son of Garrett and Willa Yates," the minister said. His voice carried through the church. "Do the parents affirm their faith and their commitment to raise this child in the way of the Lord?" "We do," Garrett said clearly. The minister looked to Willa. She hesitated for just a moment, then said, "We do." The minister dipped his fingers in the baptismal font and traced a cross on Bram's forehead. "I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. May you grow in grace and wisdom, and may your life be a blessing to all who know you." Bram started to cry, a thin wail that echoed off the rafters. Willa took him back and rocked him gently until he quieted. She looked out at the congregation and saw mixed reactions. Some people were smiling. Others looked uncomfortable or disapproving. But they were all there, witnessing this moment, acknowledging that Bram existed and had a right to exist. After the service, people filed past to congratulate them. Some were genuine, others perfunctory. Marcus was there, standing in the back with his arms crossed, glowering. Willa ignored him. An older woman stopped in front of Willa and peered down at Bram. "He is a handsome baby," she said. "You must be very proud." "I am," Willa said. "My name is Edith. I live down the road from you. If you ever need anything, you come see me." It was a small kindness, but it meant everything. Willa thanked her and felt some of the tension in her chest ease. They walked home in the afternoon sunlight with Bram sleeping in Willa's arms. Garrett held her free hand and whistled one of his terrible off-key songs. The snow was melting and the first hints of spring were showing in the budding trees. "That went better than I expected," Garrett said. "Some people were kind. See, I told you it would be all right." Willa looked down at Bram, at his tiny face peaceful in sleep. "Do you think he will have a good life here?" "I think he will have the best life we can give him, and that is all any parent can do." When they got home, Garrett built up the fire while Willa put Bram down in his cradle. They sat together in the chairs by the hearth, the same chairs where they had sat that first night when Willa had shown up soaked and desperate. "I never thought I would have this," Willa said quietly. "A husband, a home, a family, neither did I, not after Catherine died." Garrett reached over and took her hand. "But here we are, here we are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn. Outside, the world was still full of people who did not understand or approve of what they had built. Marcus was still bitter and looking for ways to cause trouble. There would be hard days ahead, times when people were cruel or when money was tight or when Bram faced prejudice for being different. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. They had their son. They had a warm house and a good farm and a future that was theirs to shape. Spring came in full force in April. The fields turned green and the apple trees bloomed. Garrett worked from dawn to dusk, plowing and planting, and Willa helped where she could while caring for Bram. The baby was growing fast, becoming more alert and responsive each day. He smiled when Garrett came in from the fields and grabbed at Willa's hair when she leaned over his cradle. One evening as they sat down to supper, Garrett said, "I have been thinking about expanding the farm, maybe getting some sheep." "Sheep?" Willa raised an eyebrow. "You know how to raise sheep?" "Not yet, but I can learn. The wool would bring in good money and it would give us more stability." Willa ladled stew into bowls. "If you think it is a good idea, then we should try it. I like the sound of that." They ate and talked about their plans for the farm, for Bram's future, for the life they were building together. It felt ordinary and domestic and absolutely precious. After supper, Willa took Bram outside to enjoy the warm evening air. She sat on the porch steps with him on her lap, pointing out the chickens scratching in the yard and the swallows darting overhead. Bram watched everything with wide eyes, taking in the world. Garrett came and sat beside them, his shoulder touching hers. He is going to be a curious one. He gets that from you. Me, I am not curious. You are curious about everything. You ask 100 questions whenever we go to town. Willa smiled. It is one of the things I love about you. Garrett kissed her temple. What else do you love about me? Are you fishing for compliments? Maybe. Willa pretended to think about it. I love that you sing even though you cannot carry a tune. I love that you make terrible jokes that you think are hilarious. I love that you are kind and stubborn and brave. I am not that brave. You married an orc woman and fought your brother-in-law in court for the right to do it. That is pretty brave in my book. Garrett was quiet for a moment. I was terrified the whole time. Terrified you would say no, terrified the court would rule against us, terrified I would lose you before we even had a chance. But you did it anyway, because some things are worth being scared for. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders. You and Bram are worth anything. They sat there as the sun set and the stars came out, 3 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful out of broken pieces. Summer arrived hot and bright. The crops grew tall and the sheep Garrett had bought thrived in their pasture. Bram learned to roll over and then to sit up on his own, each milestone celebrated like a miracle. Willa planted a vegetable garden and spent long afternoons tending it while Bram napped in a basket nearby. Life settled into a rhythm. Work and rest, laughter and quiet moments, the steady accumulation of days that became weeks that became a shared life. Marcus made one more attempt to cause trouble in late summer. He filed a complaint with the Territorial Land Office claiming that Garrett had improperly transferred ownership of the farm and that it should revert to Catherine's family estate. The claim was quickly dismissed as frivolous, but it showed that Marcus had not given up. He is going to keep trying, Willa said after they received the dismissal notice. Let him try. Every time he fails, his case gets weaker and he looks more desperate. Garrett tossed the notice into the fire. Eventually he will give up or run out of money for lawyers. What if he does not? Then we will keep fighting him. Together. And they did. When Marcus tried to get the church to annul their marriage, the minister refused. When he spread rumors in town that Willa was mistreating Bram, Edith and several other women came to the farm to check on them and left reassured and angry at Marcus for his lies. When he tried to challenge Garrett to a duel over his supposed dishonor to Catherine's memory, the magistrate threatened him with arrest for disturbing the peace. Slowly, Marcus's influence waned. People grew tired of his vendetta and started openly questioning his motives. By autumn, he had become a figure of ridicule rather than respect, the bitter brother-in-law who could not accept that his sister's widower had moved on. One October morning, exactly a year after Willa had first knocked on Garrett's door, they woke to find frost on the ground and mist hanging over the fields. Bram was babbling in his cradle, trying to pull himself up on the rails. Garrett scooped him up and brought him to the bed. Look at you trying to stand already. You are going to be walking before we know it. Bram grabbed Garrett's nose and laughed, a bright peal of delight that made them both smile. He is happy, Willa said. He is. We all are. Willa thought back to the desperate, frightened woman she had been a year ago, walking through the rain with nowhere to go and no hope for the future. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to accepting that she and her child were unwanted and unworthy. And then she thought about the man lying beside her, the one who had offered not just shelter but his whole life, his name, his love. The one who had fought for her and stood by her and become a father to a child who was not his blood. I love you, she said. Garrett looked at her with those steady gray eyes. I love you too, both of you, always. It was not a grand declaration or a dramatic moment. It was just a simple truth spoken in the morning light with their son between them. But it was everything. The years that followed were not always easy. There were hard winters and failed crops and illnesses that scared them. Bram grew up facing questions, and sometimes cruelty from other children who did not understand why he looked different. Marcus made a few more half-hearted attempts at legal challenges before finally moving away from the territory altogether. But through it all, Willa and Garrett stood together. They built the farm into a thriving operation with sheep and cattle and fields of wheat. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Iris who had Willa's green skin and Garrett's gray eyes, and another son they called Thomas, who looked fully human, but had the strength and stubbornness of his mother. Bram grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books and helping his father in the fields. He learned to navigate the complicated space of being both orc and human, belonging fully to neither world but creating his own place in between. When he was 12, he asked Garrett about his biological father. I do not know much about him, Willa said honestly. He was a trader who was passing through. He was not a good man and he left before you were born. So Garrett is my real father. Garrett put his hand on Bram's shoulder. I am your father in every way that matters. Blood does not make a family. Love does. Bram hugged him then, fierce and tight, and Willa felt her eyes sting with tears. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Garrett took Willa on a picnic to the hill overlooking the farm. They left the children with Edith and spent the afternoon just the 2 of them, eating bread and cheese and watching the clouds drift by. You remember what you said when I proposed? Garrett asked. I said yes. Before that, when you asked me for shelter, Willa smiled. I said I only needed one night, and here we are 10 years later. You offered me your family name instead of just shelter. You changed my whole life. You changed mine too. Garrett laced his fingers through hers. Best decision I ever made opening that door. They lay in the grass and talked about everything and nothing, the way they had done countless times over the years. The sun was warm and the breeze was gentle, and below them, the farm stretched out in neat fields and tidy fences, a testament to everything they had built together. When the shadows grew long, they walked back down the hill hand in hand. The children ran out to meet them, all 3 talking over each other about their day with Edith. Garrett scooped up Thomas while Willa took Iris's hand and Bram walked beside them, nearly as tall as his mother now. Inside, they had supper together around the table, a noisy, cheerful meal full of laughter and spilled milk and arguments about who would wash dishes. After the children were in bed, Willa and Garrett sat in their chairs by the fire, the same chairs that had been there since the beginning. Thank you, Willa said. Garrett looked at her questioningly. For what? For giving me a family, for giving me a home, for loving me when I did not think anyone would. You do not have to thank me for that. It was never a sacrifice. It was always just love. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside the wind picked up, rattling the shutters, but inside it was warm and safe. She thought about the pregnant orc woman who had knocked on this door asking only for shelter in a barn, never imagining she would find so much more. She thought about the widower who had opened that door and offered not just a night's refuge but his whole heart, his family name, his future. And she thought about how sometimes the best things in life come not from getting what you ask for, but from someone offering you what you did not even know you needed. I am glad I knocked on your door that night, she said. Garrett kissed the top of her head. So am I. Best thing that ever happened to me. They sat together in the firelight, Two people who had found each other in the storm and built a life out of second chances and stubborn hope and love that refused to be denied. The fire crackled and the wind blew, and somewhere upstairs one of the children coughed in their sleep. It was an ordinary night in an ordinary life, and it was perfect. Willa closed her eyes and listened to the steady beat of Garrett's heart beneath her ear. She thought about the long road that had brought her here, all the fear and pain and loneliness. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything before she found it. But mostly she thought about how grateful she was for rainstorms and stubborn widowers and the kind of love that changes everything. Morning would come and bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate. But for now, this was enough. This was everything. She was Willa Yates, wife and mother, farmer and friend. She had a family and a home and a future stretching out before her full of possibility. And it had all started with a single knock on a door and a man brave enough to answer it.